Hi YouTube, this is VidHead85 and I am running across some amazing things today, and I'm just going to read out this article here, and this is from the Congressional Budget Office. Congressional Budget Office tells us simply one thing. It is a nonpartisan group, so it is not allied with Democrats or Republicans. What they simply do is they analyze budget proposals and tell the common person exactly what will happen under said schemes or said budgets. The Congressional Budget Office does not ally itself with any group of people. So that is definitely one thing that I want all the fiscal conservatives who tend to be Republican to keep in mind. Now, just about everybody is a fiscal conservative, but the problem is, why aren't these fiscal conservatives coming out and denouncing Mitt Romney's plan? The only thing they want to do is get rid of President Obama. But let me get to this article. The Congressional Budget Office, CBO's latest report, an update to the budget and economic outlook fiscal years 2012 to 2022, brings into sharp focus the harsh reality of Republican policy, the uncontrollable debt inherent in extending the Bush tax cuts, and dire consequences of allowing them to expire for the middle class can only be counterbalanced by the benefits of extending them only to households earning less than $250,000 in taxable income. In an analysis of the report, the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities found that ending the current regime of tax cuts for the wealthy would save $823 billion in revenue and $127 billion on interest on the national debt, a 10-year deficit reduction of $950 billion compared to the current tax regime, which has produced a deficit of more than $1 trillion over each of the last 4 years. A consequence of ending the current tax cuts and revenue shortfalls resulting from the economic downturn, the CBO finds that the federal debt held by the public will have reached the highest level since 1950 by the end of the fiscal year on September 30th. At twice its 2007 level, the publicly held share will be 73% of the gross domestic product. And if the Romney-Ryan budget passes, it would have 250% of the GDP. The report projects growth through the remainder of the calendar year of 2012, with GDP growing at an inflation-adjusted rate of about 2.25% in the second half of 2012, up from 1.75% from the first half. Additionally, the unemployment rate is expected to stay above 8% while inflation remains low. Barring the new legislation, the policy changes in January will have the largest impact on the budget and economy are the provisions of tax relief, unemployment insurance reauthorization, and the Job Creation Act of 2010, the reductions in Medicare payment rates for physician services under the Affordable Care Act, the automatic spending cuts in the Budget Control Act of 2011, and the extensions of emergency unemployment benefits and payroll reductions for Social Security are scheduled to expire. Consequent to the changes, the deficit is expected to shrink to $641 billion in 2013 if we let those tax cuts expire, and barring any new legislation, should all of that be passed. 4.0% of the GDP, nearly $500 billion less than the shortfall in 2012. Albeit inflation is expected to remain low in 2013, the fiscal tightening is expected to result in the GDP declining by 0.5 in 2013, and an economic downturn that drives the unemployment rate to about 9% by the end of the year. The scenario under the alternative fiscal scenario, which assumes the current tax regime will be extended indefinitely with the exception of the payroll tax deductions in effect 2011 and 2012, including the alternative minimum taxes for inflation, holding Medicare payments rates for physicians at their current level, and the automatic spending reductions by the Budget Control Act do not occur. Under these circumstances, the deficit would total $1 trillion, nearly $400 billion more than allowing the tax cuts to expire. Real GDP, however, is expected to grow by 1.7 through the third quarter of 2013, and the unemployment rate remain about 8%. Over the long term, from 2014 to 2012 or 2022, Deficits are expected to be much higher than projected in the CBO's baseline, averaging nearly 5% of the GDP, nearly 5 times higher than present. The driver for the low deficit revenue, which is expected to remain below 19% of the GDP, which outlays would rise to more than 24%, will drive debt held by the public to 90% of the GDP by 2022, higher than any rate since shortly after World War II. Though the short-term growth in GDP would be higher, the unemployment rate would be lower. Persistently high budget deficits and increasing federal debt would discourage saving and investment, thus reducing the GDP and income relative to the levels that would occur with smaller deficits. The economy would also grow more slowly in the baseline projections, while interest rates would be higher. The report concludes, ultimately, the policies assumed in the alternative federal fiscal scenario would lead to a level of federal debt would be unsustainable from both a budgetary and an economic perspective. As already demonstrated, not only are the Bush-era tax cuts the driving impetus that underlies the ballooning national debt, but the Republican budget proposals both fail to address the deficit and continue to add to them. The simple explanation of the outcomes of two scenarios is that allowing tax cuts to expire for the middle class, better viewed as the consumer class, cuts into discretionary income available for consumption, while continuing to extend them for the wealthy adds nothing to the discretionary income used for consumption by the wealthy. Rather, allowing the tax cuts to expire for all taxpayers falls into the austerity trap, while retaining them for the wealthy assures a mounting and burdensome debt for future generations and an economy that will be incapable of addressing the problem. In the end, it should not be taught that Republican Party evolved out of simple ignorance. Rather, it must be understood that they are paid lackeys of what economist James K. Galbraith termed the predator state. As he puts it, our rulers deliver favors to their clients. These range from Native American casino operators to Appalachian coal companies to Sapin sweatshop operators to the would-be oil fields of Iraq. They include the misanthropies which led the campaign to abolish the estate tax, Charles Schwab, who suggested dividend tax cuts in 2003, the Benedict Arnold companies who moved their taxable income offshore, and the financial institutions behind last year's bankruptcy bill. Everywhere you look, public decisions yield gains to specific private entities. Gilbreth, son of John K. Gilbreth and the Lloyd M. Betson Jr. Chair in Government Business Relations and Professor of Government at the University of Texas, remarked in his book by the same title, "It is fair to say that we will never again be any U.S. government that will be a truly principled conservative might work. It is therefore equally fair to say that the failure of voters to drive them from power will serve to entrench the predator state at a cost borne only by the prey." So this is a nonpartisan report that is telling us that, like the Romney-Ryan budget, they don't really say anything about President Obama's budget, but I definitely want to get a CBO report regarding the presidential budget so that I can definitely have a more balanced view of what President Obama is going to do with this budget next year. But the problem is that a lot of people, because of the partisan divide, are thinking that the budgets are being unfair to Republicans. However, this is a nonpartisan group that is saying that what will happen to the people if we do not drive them from power? It will be the predator state, and we are seeing so many of these states become such. And like they said, the failure to drive them from power only entrenches the predator state. So, as President Obama said, don't boo, vote. The only way that we're going to ever get these people out of power is if we vote. The only way that we're ever going to get these people out of power in voter ID states is if we get that voter ID, and also bring challenges, legal challenges to said law. So I'm pretty sure that they are in the works somewhere, and some of them have been driven back to 2014 so that the Justice Department could clear it. But like I said, we are this is the Congressional Budget Office, which is a nonpartisan group that is telling us exactly everything that, quote, the liberal media has been telling us. but they come from a nonpartisan perspective. Have a great day. See you later, YouTube.